So we're privileged today to have just a speaker on each side of the term limits initiative. On the pro side is Andy Schultheis. Andy was a city council member for quite a while. He was an aide to Congressman Jared Polis. He worked for the League of Conservation Voters. He is currently working as executive director of Open Boulder, which I think is fair to say, the way he can correct this, spearheaded the effort to get this on the ballot.
Alan, can you elevate your voice a little?
Yes. On the other side is Richard Valenti, and Richard was a reporter for quite a long time for the Colorado Daily before it got bought by the Camera, and he has been a legislative aide to State Senator Raleigh Heath. And are you still an aide to Raleigh?
I am not.
You're not. He's not. Okay. And he's currently working to get Gail Schwartz elected to Congress in the West Slope. And Richard opposes the term limit initiative. So the format's going to be very unstructured, and Andy's going to give a pitch of however long he wants it to be as to why this should pass, and then Richard's going to give a counter argument, and then we'll see how much back and forth there is between them, and then at the point when that expires, we'll entertain questions if there are any from the audience. We're slated to go shorter than usual today. We're slated only to go to one, but if this continues beyond that, we could go longer. So Andy, tell us why you think, is it 302, is that the name?
302, yes.
Why 302 should be passed.
The funny story, the original number for this was actually 300, which was a 301. It was one of the two.
That was last November.
And yes, that was last November. We had to beg and plead with the city clerk to change that to keep people from being confused. So yes, it's 302, term limits. Our proposal, and yes, Open Boulder did propose and write a proposal. It is a three-term term limits for city council. 3 terms is usually either 10 or 12 years. It's hypothetical, possibly that it could be less than that, but that would be unusual. Because city council, as you all know, serve 4-year terms unless they finish in 5th place, in which they get a 2-year term. And just some thoughts about term limits in general. As you probably know, the controversy goes way, way back. It was a matter of considerable debate before the Founding Fathers when they were writing the Constitution. Several of them proposed and fought for term limits for members of Congress and the President and lost. Supreme Court in, I believe, the 80s said that there could be no law at the federal level on term limits, and that it would have to be instituted by constitutional amendment. So there has since then been a constitutional amendment proposed every year, and it has been, for the most part, a partisan issue on the federal level that has gone nowhere. It has been considerably less controversial at the state and local level. Most states in the country do have some form of term limits now. Colorado's was passed in 20 some odd years ago, about 70% of the vote. Colorado's term limits are 8 years for members of the legislature and the governor, and most, if not all, county commissions. Our term limits would be 10 or 12 years. The most famous recent example on the state level is the California legislature, which had very draconian term limits for a while, and then a few years ago was changed to 12 years, same as ours, for both their assembly and their state senate. On the local level, it's even more common. 9 out of 10 of the biggest cities in the country have some term limits. And most of the towns and cities around us too. Fort Collins, Longmont, Lafayette, Louisville, etc. Why do people generally support term limits? I would say that there are 3 reasons that people usually give for them, and our reason for proposing them in Boulder is mostly consistent with a third of these 3. So the first one, which is the one that Thomas Jefferson and John Adams were talking about, was this whole idea of enforcing citizen legislator ideal. This goes way back to the ancient Greeks, who, by the way, had very, very stiff term limits. And the idea is that you didn't want people becoming career elected officials. That's less of an issue in Boulder since it's unpaid. It's hard to make a career being on city council here. The second issue is for racial and ethnic diversity. There's mixed evidence on whether term limits actually produce that. In some cases they have, and in some cases they haven't. But from our point of view, anytime we can make that happen, that's a good thing. And then the third reason is that it's argued that it increases participation in local government, and that is in fact what Open Boulder is about. Open Boulder was created a couple years ago with the idea that we needed to get more and different kinds of people participating in local government. You know, renters, young people from the tech industry, people from the outdoor industry, people, the kinds of people that make Boulder Boulder. And while Boulder has pretty good participation rates in local government by most standards, it could be a lot better. And that's what Open Boulder was created to do. So the idea is, with term limits, you create predictable open seats. Seats that you know will be open years in advance. And people who have busy lives and who want to serve their community can look to that, can look to the list of open seats and decide that's the year I'm going to run because they have a pretty good shot at winning. And in fact, they've done the research on the California term limits, and it has actually increased the participation rate in the number of people running for assembly and senate positions there. So one of the people often ask me, okay, so you're looking for a greater diversity of theology, you're looking for different kinds of political thoughts on council, and the answer really is no. What I'm looking for, what I want more on council is people with different sorts of life experiences, people with different sets of priorities. There hasn't, I don't know the current situations of the members of council, but to my knowledge, there hasn't been a renter on city council in a very, very long time. That doesn't mean that current city council is insensitive to the needs of renters in the city, but it does mean that that perspective is not heard every Tuesday night when the housing crisis is discussed or the transportation issues are discussed and so on and so forth. So 302 is a fairly mild term limit proposal, as I mentioned. It's 12 years. It is written into the proposal that current members of council would be allowed to complete their terms no matter how many terms they've served in the past, but current council members would not be exempt. That's what we've proposed. It's on the ballot as 302. We really appreciate your support, and I would love to take any questions you have.
Let's hold the questions till later. Thank you, Amy, for giving a good pro statement. Richard, why should people vote against this?
Okay, just one thing, I think a lot of people here, I see a lot of familiar faces, probably remember I covered city council very closely for about 5 years, so I do have a little experience. Andy was actually one of my best But, and then I'll get to some of the things that I just heard probably after my intro statement. My main point is I firmly believe that a ballot measure has to offer either a solution to a problem or a net benefit. I don't believe this one does either. When you look at what could possibly happen with this ballot measure, the only tangible thing that could happen this decade in the 2010s would be to unseat Lisa. If Lisa should decide not to run, then it goes to Suzanne Jones, who, if she keeps winning 4-year terms, this measure would not be tested until 2023. If Suzanne should decide not to run as well, the potential is there that it won't be tested until 2025, in the year 2025, if man is still alive. Man, the old Zager and Evans song. There could be all kinds of combinations of 2-year and 4-year terms, so those numbers may or may not work out. The main reason I became interested in this, I worked for the state senate, and in May of this year, 8 senators were term limited, and they were very good senators. The way we looked at it, we probably lost 100 years of capital experience. They're senators until January, but 100 total years of capital experience with deep experience in budget. We're losing 2 Senate presidents, 2 majority leaders. And I just remember a person on Twitter or maybe in Scuttlebutt passing by saying, this is a brain drain like I've never seen before. And I mean no disrespect to anyone who might replace these people, but they lost a lot. And at about the same time, I started reading about the Open Boulder ballot measures, so my head started turning, which is dangerous, and I decided to look into it and see, is there really a problem? And my conclusion is not. I've been looking at this sort of a 3-tiered system. No need, no problem, no net benefit. The one thing Andy said that I will comment on, if it's about increasing participation. In just simple Google searches, I found in the last 2 elections, 3 out of the 5 people who won seats were first-time candidates. So that's 60% in both of the last 2 elections. In the last 3 elections, 2011, 2013, and 2015, the top vote getter in each of the 3 elections was a first-time candidate. Boulder has had 2 special elections that I know of, 2005, 2007. A new candidate, a first-time candidate, won those special elections in both, and then both of them went on to become the top vote getter in the next election with less than a year under their belt. So I don't believe there's any problem whatsoever getting new people to run. In the last 2 elections, we have 2 people who have been on council for extended terms, Lisa and Matt. As I understand it, Matt Applebaum has told the camera he won't be running this time. In their last election, both Lisa and Matt beat a first-time candidate who finished just behind them by about 500 votes. And one was out of, they each had about 10,000 votes, the other about 14,000. So it's possible for a first-time candidate to beat an incumbent. And as far as getting people to run, the last race I covered as a journalist was in 2007. 22 people ran, and there were old-timers on the council back then too. To keep going on numbers very quickly, I got lists of council members going back to the year 1966 and decided to do statistics starting with people who were elected for the first time in 1967. So a 49-year sample, which I believe is pretty statistically significant, almost 50 years now. the average length of a council term throughout that entire time period is about 6 years. There's a couple different ways of looking at it. Only 6 members have served more than 12 years, and if you have the handout, I think the names are on there. Only 4 more served between 8 and 12 years, and I think the names are on your handout also. Just barely less than half of all council members over that time served 4 years or less. A few people were at 3, a few people were at 2. And unlike Congress, whose members make $174,000 a year, and Andy touched on this, council, I would not call it a professional position. They technically part-time, it doesn't feel like it at 1 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday morning, but they put in a lot of hours. I know that from covering the meetings and being awake at that time myself. They're paid just kind of a pittance, a stipend, and they tend to leave office on their own behalf for the most part. They get to a point where they have a better job opportunity, something that pays better. They get tired of being away from their families every Tuesday night. Higher office, like Casey Becker, I know, ran for the House of Representatives. And so there are a whole bunch of reasons why a person who's not retired would choose to move on to a different job. And that's what happens in practice. Most people serve 4 or 8 years and decide enough's enough. And on net benefit, there's a difference between benefit and net benefit. I don't want to say there's never anything bad about anything. There were, 1 or 2 good things about 300 and 301 as well, but we decided on net if they weren't going to pass. If all this does is force Lisa to step down at a certain point in time, what we're doing potentially, depending on who runs against her, of course, is trading a person with gigantic amounts of city experience for someone who may not have that type of experience. And to me, that would be a net loss of benefit as far as I'm concerned. Council deals with some tough issues: the budget, transportation, public safety, municipalization. And personally speaking for myself, I want a decent amount of experience on the council to make those tough choices. If a person wants to get a chance in city government, there are how many boards? 25 boards. It's a good place to get a start. Or education is a good place to get a start, or study, what have you. These are all good places to get a start. City council, probably not the best place to get a start. So, and the other thing, it's amending the charter. That's the last thing I want to say. It's like amending the city's constitution. So if we decide somewhere along the lines that this isn't working for us, we have to go back to the people to change it. So I'll stop there to keep the intro brief.
Andy, responses to what Richard's?
Just a couple things. The state legislature is a great example, I think, and Richard and I just think differently about this. I love Senator Heath. I worked to get him elected, and I think he's done a wonderful job. He's going to be replaced because of term limits this year by a guy named Steve Fenberg, who's one of the brightest young lights in Colorado politics. And he's going to get his start as a state senator because of term limits. And I think that's terrific, and despite the fact that I love Raleigh. And their ideology, I think, is quite close. But I think it's a good thing generally for the state, for the city, that Steve will become a state senator next year. The other thing I'd mention is that one of the things Open Boulder does a lot of is recruit candidates to run for council. It's one of our cores. And one of the things we run into a lot when we talk to people who have busy lives that want to serve is, you know what, I want to do this, but the chances of me winning are pretty slim. I'm going to wait until there's an open seat, until I can foresee myself winning. And we've lost 2 or 3 really, really strong candidates. for that reason. What this proposal does is create some predictable open seats. You know, it says that in 2019 there is guaranteed to be an open seat. There might not be another one for a while. As I said, it's a fairly modest proposal, but those seats will be open and people will know about them and people will prepare to run because they have a pretty good chance of winning.
Richard, more comments?
Vote no. Two things about what Andy just said, and I think they're fundamental to my beliefs also. In a competitive situation, individuals have a responsibility to make themselves competitive. In the instance of Steve Fenberg, it's not like Steve just popped out of nowhere. Steve has been working the political scene since I was a journalist. I remember covering New Era, Colorado probably 10 years ago, I'm gonna guess 8, 9, 10 years ago. And so Steve's been, he organized, founded the organization. He has been out on the road, not just working in Boulder. He's right now got people at colleges across the state. He's done the legwork himself. He's been involved in ballot measures. He was involved in getting people to vote for municipalization. So Steve is not just someone who surfaced this year. He's been working for it. And this also goes to the notion that we need representation from various classes. The candidate needs to do their work, and then the people who are not being represented also need to do the same thing. So for example, if someone really wants a renter to be on council, and we know that 50% of the people, maybe more now, in the city are renters, why not organize? If you can get 50% of the people in Boulder organized on anything, you're doing a good job. You've got big numbers. Jan Burton in the last election got a seat with about 8,000 votes. So if you take, you know, any percentage of that 50% of renters banding together for renters, you've got a good chance at getting a seat. And even another example Andy had, the tech sector. There's a person who has served on council who is from the tech sector. His name is Matt Applebaum. So he's from the tech sector. He, I don't know, 16, 17 years. So it's completely possible to get someone from the tech sector. We've got a strong group of people now with Google coming in and Twitter, GNIP, startups, Andrew Hyde. Why doesn't Andrew Hyde run for council? He's popular.
Believe me, I tried to talk him into it.
Yep, yep. So if people want to organize on any of these things, you know, you live in North Boulder, you want someone from North Boulder, you can organize out in North Boulder. So that's probably my main response to what Andy just had.
Andy, further comments?
No, that's good. It's good conversation. This conversation we're having for.
Do you want to keep this particular dialogue going with
Do you want to ask us questions, or do you want to just keep riffing?
Well, why don't you keep riffing if you feel so inclined?
You know, I think I've said the important things. It's I've served on a lot of boards over the years, not just city council, nonprofit boards, and I have friends who serve on corporate boards. And one of the things that is consistent is that although it can be painful, instituting term limits on those boards is one of the most important things they do. Not because there are bad people they're getting rid of, I mean, far from it, but because getting that new energy, slightly new perspective, new way of thinking about it can break through policy paralysis, can get the existing board members to be on their game and think of things in a different way, and is really healthy for those organizations. I realize that elected official is not quite the same as a nonprofit board or a corporate board, but there's some similarities.
And do I have to ask for permission from the moderator to speak? So the one way to accomplish this is through an election, and to keep it simple, at this very moment in time, I don't see any of them here, but at this very moment in time, 66% of the current council has served for less than 1 4-year term. So we have the new ideas. If that's what they're bringing, I'm not sure, you know, every one of them is a good idea, but we have 66% at 4 years or less, 33 at 3 years roughly, 33 at 1 year roughly, and then Suzanne's only been there for 5 years. So I think there's plenty of new blood there. And then about being discouraged from running, I would argue that that has very little to do with term limits, especially given that very few people serve to the extent of the open Boulder ballot measure. The next election that's coming up, 2017, if all of the incumbents except Matt decides to run, there will be 4 people, and none of them will be even remotely close to the term limit. It will be 3 people with 4 years experience and 1 person with 2 years experience. Back to personal responsibility, occasionally you lose. I've lost things in my life. So I know people who have lost and bounced back. And I think in both cases, both Matt and Lisa lost special elections, but they tried again. So if you're going to get discouraged because you can't get your seat 1 year and never try again, I'm not sure that says anything good about the candidate. Personally, you do have to have some perseverance if you run for office.
Andy, thoughts on?
I'd love to get some questions.
Okay, I'll ask a question, and this will be my only one. And this is not either pro or con, I don't think. Incumbency seems to have a strange power in American politics. It seems to give people a much better chance of getting reelected. And why do you think that is?
Mostly name recognition, I think. And that's an interesting point. So Boulder has this, we're all used to it, but it's a rather unusual system we have here, where we have 9 council members, which is already a little unusual. That's 2 more than most cities, many cities. And we're all elected at large. And you only have to finish 5th to win most years, sometimes even lower than that. And every voter gets 5 votes, which means that you win if you get a whole bunch of 5th place votes, which is interesting, and it's unusual, and it's one of the results of that, I think, is that name recognition is doubly important here than it is even in most races, because even when I fill out my ballots, at least before I ran for council and I really knew what was going on, I would I fill out the first 3 because I know them or I met them or I went to an event or something, and then I get down to the bottom 2 and I say, I got 2 more spots left. And I pick people I've heard of and I haven't heard anything bad about. And so I think that is a big, big advantage for incumbency.
Why do you think incumbents have so much of an advantage in getting reelected?
So here's one place where Andy and I will agree. It's name recognition, absolutely. But again, back to personal responsibility, it's also up to the candidate to keep their name away from bad press and to make the meetings and fill out their questionnaires. They still have to come to forums and do the work that it takes to run a candidacy. So there is an advantage to it, but I'll guarantee you that I will vote against an incumbent or 2 in the next election. It's completely possible to reevaluate. An incumbent did lose in the last election. An incumbent I happen to like, actually, lost in the last election. So it is possible for this name recognition not to be all powerful, but I would be foolish to say it's not very powerful.
So questions from Dick?
So, Andy, I think you said this is a modest proposal.
Yes.
And we've been talking about name recognition here. But it's my understanding a lot of term limits will simply limit the candidate to 2 consecutive terms.
Right.
And then if the person steps down for the next election, you can kind of reset the clock. But part of the question is to correct me if I'm wrong in the following. I think yours says there's a lifetime limit of 3 terms.
Right.
So Open Boulder must feel really strongly about this, and particularly when you're proposing something that has lost before, you might have wanted to make it as palatable as possible. And going to a lifetime limit, which seems to me to be kind of extreme, causes me extra difficulty. So I'd like you to both comment on that, if you will.
So the difference between a consecutive term limit and a lifetime limit. So in looking at term limit laws around the country, there's some of both. Obviously, our presidential one is lifetime. Some state legislatures do that, some of them do the consecutive thing. From our point of view, if you serve 12 years in your lifetime, I mean, there aren't very many people who are going to want to come back and serve another 12 years. To me, it's not that big a difference. But we wanted to do it that way because we wanted to maximize the number of true open seats, meaning not only literally not an incumbent, but not anybody who was an incumbent for 12 years 2 years ago, which is essentially the same thing.
So you Carlo.
It happens in Boulder politics, which another odd and wonderful thing about Boulder politics, very unusual, that people do tend to come and go. They go away and they come back. No place else I've lived has that happened, but which is neither here nor there. It's just interesting. So I don't think it's a huge difference, frankly, and we had a debate about this, and we decided the more effective limit would be a lifetime limit.
I don't know that I can really address that question very much. Whether it's consecutive or lifetime, it's still a limit. It's still sort of an arbitrary number of terms. And the one thing I would say is there's, in my mind, a little bit of unfairness to the ballot measure in that one candidate might be limited potentially to 6 years and another might be limited to 12 years. So that's really the only thing I have to say about that question at the moment.
More questions? Liz?
Andy, you mentioned renters' perspective as a thing that's we're not getting on council. And what is the mechanism that ties term limits to getting a renter on council? I mean, the directly, how do you actually achieve that goal by?
Well, not directly, obviously, but our feeling is that if there are more open seats, more newcomers to the political system will be able to win. And again, this is a long play. This is going to take a long time to change things because we're not limiting people to 4 years or something like that. So there's not going to be, as Richard pointed out, a deluge of open seats. It's going to take time. But our sense is that if you open more seats up to non-incumbents, more non-incumbents will win. And renters are just one category of people. Latino residents being another one, and younger voters are a third one, who aren't very often represented on council, and the more opportunities to win without having to beat an incumbent they have, the better, from our point of view.
And to leave.
Eventually what?
Richard?
That's a pretty recent council member.
She's Latina, yeah. I don't think she's a Roger.
She lives in co-housing. I know her very well. Just real quick, I don't think there's any nexus whatsoever between being a category and being involved in term limits. I go back to the thing I said earlier. If you want a person of color on council, if you want a young person of color, back to Steve Fenberg, New Era did just a tremendous job of organizing on campuses or where there are colleges throughout the state. So if they can go out on the CU campus and get 8,000 people to vote for a qualified candidate, then they have a good chance of winning. I just really believe this is a competitive situation. It's not really the place where you just give someone a chance based on a demographic. They have to be competitive in some way. When I worked for the Daily, we did endorse Eugene Pearson. I don't know how many people remember Eugene. Yeah, a lot of people know Eugene. And we didn't do it just, it was nice to have a young person, but we didn't do it just because he was young. He was qualified, involved, very, very smart. So I will probably always turn back to personal responsibility. You need to make yourself competitive, and the years of service, I just kind of believe are arbitrary. I expected maybe to see Dave Krieger from the camera here for some reason, but I was prepared to say there was a guy the Denver Broncos signed in his 15th year named Peyton Manning, who came on, and his 15th year had 2 of the best seasons passing anybody has ever seen. If we would have said cut off at 12 years, he hasn't done the trick. But it's a competitive situation, and you, so to say, vote Peyton Manning out of office when he can't run 10 yards for a first down anymore, not because he's been there for 12 years.
Questions, Ann?
In the past, quite a long time ago, I was a volunteer lobbyist for Golden Valley League of Women Voters at the state legislature. And then I wasn't, and so 3 years later went back to the legislature. And I knew most of the lobbyists because they were all ex-legislators. So obviously, even though a lot of the people I know oppose term limits at the legislature, I'm very glad that they had term limits, because it's pretty obvious that those people who were legislators have a relationship with the existing legislators, which the new people do not have. So I think that does say a lot for term limits. As for Boulder, we don't really have quite a similar situation, but we do have some people on the council who are extremely powerful because of their previous knowledge of having been involved at the council, and who very much influence things that happen at this point at the council. So I think that even though people who talk about good politics like a league or so on oppose term limits, I think there's a lot to be said for term limits if you want to look at outcomes that are decided by people who know how to manipulate the system versus people who are brand new in the system.
That seems to be more a statement than a question. Is, you want comments on your statement, or?
Is it okay to have a statement? Or maybe I could put it as a question.
We could make it a 3-way debate.
Okay. Other questions? Deborah?
Could you talk about the potential of maybe the fact that council people aren't paid as being a factor in why we don't have more diversity on council?
That's a big factor, I think, although I can't point to a scientific study that shows that. Council, if you're not familiar, council makes about $10,000. Well, it's more than that now. It was $10,000 a year when I was on council. I think it's slightly more than that, but it's nowhere near what the hours that they put in. And so for a lot of people, that's prohibitive because it's a 30-hour-a-week job at least. And that makes it hard. And I support, Open Boulder supports the proposal this year to to allow council members to get health benefits and other benefits of the city. I personally would like to see the council's pay increased. I think that would be quite a powerful tool to increasing the number of and different kinds of people who want to serve their government. Absolutely, I agree. I think it's a full-time job, and I don't know if it should be paid as a full-time job, but it should be paid more than it is.
I was able to be paid when I was covering city council. Not that it wasn't great, but you know, there were nights where I was making more money than the people serving. And it, you know, it wasn't great money then. The one thing I would say is there's sort of a double-edged sword to this. The low pay is also why a lot of people step down. So to me, the low pay keeps it a citizen government. It allows for a lot of turnover. And again, I know Boulder's pretty white. I know a couple of Latinos and Latinas who have served. Rich Lopez, I don't believe, was in it for the money. I think he did okay with his law practice. Angelique has probably done pretty well in the job market also. So I do believe it's possible for people to band together and support someone based on demographics if that's what we want, and that's how people get elected. Angelique had tremendous support the year that she ran, after 2 years.
Leonard?
I'm going to make a comment, but it's going to turn into a question. And so,
There are new rules.
Planning board experience.
pardon? In planning board, we're only allowed to have comments and questions. So the diversity thing works two ways. This is the comment part, because you could take, for example, Mary Young, who's Latina and on city council, as you pointed out. It's a very white town, and maybe there's a constituency in the Latino community that really values her representation. But and maybe after year 12, they continue to value it. And the odds are that if she is term limited off, that the replacement candidates that are competing for that seat are by and large probably going to be white. And so I could see where the term limits may have a reverse effect of actually reducing diversity. So the question part of this is, in a democracy, how much sense does it make to have a charter amendment like this that serves as a gatekeeper to the choices that the electorate have for candidates that they would like to vote for?
For me?
It's for both. Yeah.
So that's the biggest reason why I'm not in favor of it. Personally, I value experience. If you take the example of this current council, as I mentioned, 2/3 of them have yet to serve their first term. I might wish to make my next decision in the next election to bring more experience to council. And if it is someone with more than 12 years experience, I would like to maintain the right to be able to do that. As it stands at this moment, I can vote for anyone as long as they meet the residency requirements and gather 25 petition signatures. I can vote for anyone. This ballot measure potentially could take away my right to do that.
Andy, thoughts?
Yeah, I hear you, and that is one of the traditional arguments against term limits, for sure. Well, here's what I would say: we limit the number of people who can run for council and other political seats in other ways as well. For instance, in Boulder, we say you have to have been a resident of Boulder for more than a year. I think it's what the charter says. To run, and you have to be a certain age. and you have to be an elector. None of which necessarily has to be the case, and also limits the number of people who are allowed to run for council. You know, in the federal level, we say you have to be 25 to run for House and 30 to run for the Senate, and you have to be a resident of the district you run in, the state you run in, actually, not the district. So we do limit in some ways, and this would be another one. And I personally think it's worth it to try and to keep that turnover going. But it is an argument against it, I agree, and it is often used.
Lynn?
Where's the money on these two campaigns so far? And I have suspicions, and I know you're gonna say Alec is not funding better, but
Who?
Alec, American
Alec
Legislative
who?
Exchange Council.
Oh my gosh, well then, goodness no.
But I'm sure there are ties after Plenary taking over the transportation corridor, et cetera. But in any case, I just wonder where the money is on this.
So by where's the money, you're not talking about odds in Vegas, you're talking about
Serious.
campaign
Serious. Money.
contributions.
So,
Yes. It trickles down into the local economy.
so the contributions will all be listed, obviously, on the campaign disclosures.
But they're friends.
Friends. Well, anyway, so Open Boulder gets contributions. We have about 100 donors right now, all from Boulder, a variety of people. So, I mean, it's hard to characterize it in one way or the other.
Like in 301, it was 140,000 to 80,000 or something, you know, Richard? What's this one? For 301.
300 and 301 got up to about 180,000.
Yeah.
I don't remember, maybe someone here remembers what Livable Boulder had.
40.
I don't know, I can't speak for our opponents, and all our disclosures will be disclosed, so you'll be able to tell to the dollar how much we spent, and it'll be something close to what a city council race costs.
So it's just not disclosed.
It will be.
There's a disclosure.
There's disclosure next month, next Tuesday.
So Karen,
And just real quick, I'm not aware of an opposition campaign. I'm not part of a campaign, and frankly, I'm losing money being here at this moment. I wish there were donuts or something.
so Karen, did you have a question?
Yeah, and you referred to the lack of a study that you were aware of in terms of the pay issue.
Yeah.
But Richard has presented a pretty detailed analysis of number of years, and as I see those numbers, I say to myself, yeah, what's the need for this? When you look at these numbers that show that there is a lot of turnover on council, and there are a lot of open seats in an ongoing kind of way, what's your argument for the real need for this, based on this data?
Our main argument is that when there are no open seats, or few open seats, people decide not to run, and the quality and diversity of candidates running is lower because of that. That's our reason Open Boulder exists, to try to increase the number of people who are interested in local government and participate.
But the data shows there are open seats. There are those opportunities that you're.
Well, more would be better. Is our feeling on this? And, you know, again, over time, this is going to make a difference, but in the short term, it won't. And sure, most people serve less than 12 years, and that's fine. And I think actually, two of Richard's arguments were kind of opposed to each other. On the one hand, he says most people serve far less than 12 years, but on the other hand, he says we need people to serve longer for experience and knowledge reasons.
Well, I mean, you can have some of each, right?
You can have some of each, and I think that's what we'll get with our proposal. 12 years is a long time.
No.
And you can build up a whole lot of knowledge and experience in 12 years and take your best shot at getting your agenda passed. If you can't pass it in 12 years, maybe it's someone else's chance to try.
So tell me why you think the next, did you say 50 years, Richard? of data? You went back
Yeah,
to
49,
40.
basically 50.
Why do you think the next 40 or 50 years is going to be different than the last 40 or 50 years and require this constraint?
I'm not trying to, with or without our proposal passing.
Yes. I mean, the data shows that there is turnover, there are openings.
Yeah, we'd like more.
There are very few people who, and we can name them, looking at the sheet, who have exceeded your limits.
Right.
So, in the last 40 or 50 years, we've eliminated, what, a handful of seats over 40 or 50 years. What makes you think that in the next 40 or 50 years, the pattern would be any different?
I'm not sure, it would be, I'm not sure what your question is. Well, just because something, I mean, we would like more open seats and more turnover.
How many more?
A few. As I said, it's gonna take a long time and it's gonna affect relatively few people.
Why would it be different after another 40 or 50 years?
I think we're ships crossing the Atlantic.
I'm kind of wondering, Karen, if you're actually asking if it doesn't pass. If
Yeah,
we just
either way.
let things
I mean,
go.
to me, either way, it's not going to make a huge difference based on these data.
It's not gonna make a huge difference, but I think it will make a positive difference.
So yes, over there.
Well, one thing, I'd like to point out about, the numbers Richard put together, and this is really excellent work, by the way, Richard, it's really helpful, is that even the people that are winning the new seats are pretty well-funded people. And I think part of this is trying to get a little bit of the money out of the elections, because as, has been said, name recognition is a big driver of who gets elected. And when you have incumbents, typically you're going to have groups that back them up, with helping them out with, donations, etc. And so I think that it's hard for a person that doesn't have a lot of money and donations behind them to get into the race. And I think that's part of what this is about, to help open up those new seats, to get more money out of these elections so that there's more people are able to run. Do you agree? That's my question.
Are the records still up from last year? I think they probably are on the city website. I don't know if they are or not, but the one thing I would say is the 3 people who won seats last time, who were first-time candidates, did take in a fair amount of money. I do believe that they got donations through organizations and individuals. So I'm not sure necessarily that a new person can't raise money. And then when you think of money in politics, if you just think of the cost to send a round of mailers to the entire city of Boulder, that's actually quite a bit of money in terms of what we do here at the city level, not the state or federal level. So I don't want to say I like money in politics, but you have to be prepared to raise some of it. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish everything was on Facebook or something, but and someday we'll get there. But for the time being, there does have to be some fundraising if you want to be competitive. It's unfortunate.
Any thoughts on
No, I think that's a good answer.
that? So, Joe?
This is back to the question, where does the money come from? And on your election report filed on 9th of September, you show $30,000 in in-kind contributions. There's really no elucidation as to what that is. Could you explain what that is?
That was the expense to get the question on the ballot.
So that was for
Canvassers, yeah.
It's for
Signature
what?
gatherers. Signature gatherers.
Signature gatherers?
Yeah.
Yeah. And who paid that?
Open Boulder did.
Okay. Is that opaque, or can you see where Open Boulder's money comes
No,
from?
Open Boulder does not disclose its donors.
So
So
let's-
it's kind of dark money, right?
Let's take two more
Text
questions and then wrap
Yeah,
it
I
up.
have to run. Sorry.
Boundary.
Yeah.
Gwen?
Yeah, I'd like Andy specifically to address Richard's middle point there in the last paragraph, the no benefit, by taking experience from the legislative body, the advantage and institutional knowledge shifts to staff, lobbyists, and special interest groups.
I think for very short term limits, that can be an issue, but for a 12-year or 10 or 12-year limit, I don't think that's an issue at all. I think it takes, in my experience, takes about 2 years, 3 years, something like that, for a council member to really get up to speed on, to know how the budget works and know how the city works, and then after that, they're at full speed. So if you were proposing like a 3 or 4 year limit, yeah, that would be a big issue. But for 10 or 12 years, I don't think that's an issue.
Ruth, and then I guess we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, Andy, to me, it sounds like putting on term limits, from what you said earlier, sounds like you're really trying to get the young people, the renters, the ethnic groups, the diversity of people of ages and types, and onto city council, where instead of being like Richard was saying, it's people who are well-known, who have done a lot of neighborhood work, who have served on the boards, they speak out at council, their name gets recognized, and everybody knows all the efforts and time and their own money that they put into doing these things. And I find it sort of strange, and so I'm wondering, because Open Boulder got quite a few of their people on the city council during the last election, just with the system we've got. And why is it you think now, since you had such a great time, results with your last election, that now it's time to do the term limits for the people? When I think, the young people have other things in life where they can't devote all this time into the city, and that's why the others are running. And maybe the only way to get them would be having full-time salaries, and people, all groups, could be able to run. So
Well,
what's your
I agree
thought
with that
on
last
that?
point.
Why are you so concerned about maybe you didn't do well last time? I thought you did pretty well, so what's going on?
Yeah, well, it's got nothing to do with that, obviously. But I think where we fundamentally disagree is this idea that being around the community and serving on boards and doing all that should be a prerequisite to serving on council, and I don't think that should be a prerequisite. As it happened last year, three candidates we endorsed won. Two of them, Bob and Aaron, were longtime community members, well known. They did the traditional route. Only one of them, Jan, didn't, and even she was pretty well known around the community. I personally would like to see more people who perhaps haven't served on boards and commissions and president of community groups or anything like that give it a shot. I think it's more representative of the city as a whole if one or two people like that are on council. And I think our disagreement is that I don't necessarily think that would be a bad thing.
I'm not sure I have a strong disagreement actually, but I would say I don't believe boards or commissions are a prerequisite, but they're good things. What you do when you serve on a board is you not only focus in on your issue, but you also interact with the council at the next level. So, Leonard knows the council's gonna call off your next decision. I hope you know that. So you're...
That's the first I've heard.
But what you do is you get used to going to your board meeting every month or every 2 weeks. You learn how your decisions interact with the council. You deal with people who like or dislike what you're voting on. And it's good experience. It's just like college. If I wanted to say I would like my next job to be in cellular molecular biology, they would ask, have you gone to college? So you've got,
I'm hoping you're made.
it was
English won't do it.
pre-med or pre-law, one of those. And so I don't think it's a prerequisite at all. It's just, it would be something I evaluate a council candidate on if they were running. Have you done something in the community? Have you served on a board? Can you bring some type of experience to the council? If Obama decides to run to, move to Boulder after being president, I'm not going to say, why didn't you serve on Parks and Rec? He would get my vote as soon as he makes residency.
And I have to apologize, I have to jump on that.
Okay, we'll call it a wrap. Andy, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.